On today's episode of the How Did It Happen podcast, I've got Dr. Tarryn MacCarthy. Tarryn's got an amazing story. She immigrated to the U.S. when she was 10 years old, ended up in medical and dentistry school, had a great family and a career, and she was miserable. We talk about how she ran away, the shame she felt, her transformation, which is amazing, and why no one can make you feel anything without your consent. Hello, Tarryn. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Mike. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, it's good to hear your voice. You got such a great voice, and I haven't heard it in a little bit, so it's really nice to hear your voice again. Like, good to have you here.
That human connection thing really matters, doesn't it?
Yeah, it kind of does. Yeah. So everybody, you got a little taste of Dr. MacCarthy in my little episode intro, but here's a little more about her so you can get as excited as I am for this conversation. Dr. Tarryn MacCarthy is the co-owner of Mbrace Orthodontics. She's the CEO of Embrace the Lead, LLC. She's the host of the Business of Happiness podcast, which I was fortunate to be a guest on, episode 97, if you want to check that out. A motivational speaker and a dreamer. One day, Tarryn woke up, looked around at the amazing life she'd built, and realized that she was miserable. There's got to be more than life than this, she said to herself. And that question started her journey and helped codify her belief that 3 words should guide everything she does: appreciate, allow, and amplify. You can find out more about Tarryn at the bizofhappiness.com. That's her website, and the Instagram handle is the Biz of Happiness. Tarryn MacCarthy on LinkedIn, TarrynMacCarthy. And Tarryn, I start every show with the same simple question, and that is, how did it happen for you?
Such a powerful question. I love it. And thank you for the intro, Mike.
You're
that
welcome.
was beautiful.
Did I do okay with that?
You did fabulously.
Okay.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. I think you told the story of how it happened for me. You know, I imagined success since I was little. I'm an immigrant from South Africa originally. So we came to this land of opportunity and imagined success for myself in the marriage of 2 things I love, which is science and artistry. And dentistry for me spoke to that. And there's this promise of entrepreneurship and leadership and, building a business and giving back to the community. It was such a beautiful amalgamation of all the things that were deeply important to me. And so success to me looked like becoming a dentist. And really where it all happened for me was this one fateful day when I'd finally achieved all my dreams. I had the practice, the dental practice. In the dental world, we always say we put our shingle on the hang our shingle, and then patients come and see us. So I'd hung my shingle, and I had the house, the fancy car, the fancy bank account, the fancy kids, even the fancy dogs. I had been acquiring all the things that told me that I would be successful. And I was absolutely miserable. And what misery looked like to me was escape. I just needed to escape. Every day I was just pushing through the day to get to the end of the day, to get to bed. Every week I was just pushing through the week to get to the weekend. And I was escaping at night into alcohol. That was one way of escape for me. Another one was excessive exercise. I was the queen of having 2 martinis after seeing a full day of patients and then getting up at 4:30 in the morning to work it out and run off the hangover on the treadmill. And I realized I was just trying every moment of my life to escape, to run away. And I didn't even recognize the person in the mirror anymore. And I think for me, it also was blanketed in a ton of shame, because here I'd acquired the life of my dreams, theoretically, and I was miserable. and I didn't understand what was wrong with me. I was comparing myself to family members who hadn't, quote unquote, succeeded to the extent I had, or people I'd left behind in South Africa who didn't have the opportunities I had. And this sense of what's wrong with me that I can't find joy and happiness in this success. And that was the beginning of
Mhm.
my journey of beginning to understand what success is and learning what that meant for me.
Hmm. And so I don't know if I knew that you came here from South Africa.
Mm,
So, but before I get to that, this I kept hearing in my mind the word trapped when you were talking about your experience there. So I was hearing trap, but then I was like, well, what's the trap? So if
totally.
I don't know, yeah. So what was the trap? Because yeah, what was the trap?
Yeah, isn't that so you're spot on. I At the time, I think what I would have said is I felt like I was on a treadmill that I had built that I couldn't get off of. So it was a
Hmm.
life I had chosen. I'd chosen every step of the way. Nobody forced me into dentistry. Nobody
Right.
forced me to buy a business, but the business itself had started owning me, my patients. It was my perspective. My patients owned me. My team owned me. Hell, I even felt like my children owned me, and every day was such a overwhelming, stress that I wasn't able to take the time for myself, and I thought I was taking the time for myself. Here I was exercising, here I was having a martini with my husband at night, but I wasn't able to get in touch with what mattered to me and to access me, and it did feel like a trap. And I think
Hmm.
that's where the shame set in, Mike. I think you hit the nail on the head there is the perception is, well, you aren't trapped, Taryn. You've created this yourself. And yet it feels that way. Like
Hmm.
you're a victim of your own circumstance that you created. And I think that's where the shame compiles. And what I realized was I'm no good to anyone when I'm in that space. I wasn't a great leader. I was definitely not a good business owner. I was not a great mom or a great wife. And all of those areas, I think when we are high achievers, we want to be the best. And when we keep pushing, pushing, forcing ourselves to be the best and showing up short of that, that also adds more of that sense of inadequacy or not being good enough.
Right.
And I think that trapped feeling puts you there.
Well, you so you said a couple things that really resonated with me there. First of all, the choice of being trapped. So you get what you ask for in life typically, and I know my experience in business has been similar where I came along to a spot where I was very frustrated about where I was, but and I was looking for someone to blame, Taryn, but there
Yeah,
was no one to blame. And and ironically, or maybe not ironically, but the 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 nobody knew that I was feeling this way either. So I wanted to ask you because I was putting on this, I have this persona that I need to be, so no matter how I'm feeling, I can't like come in here and tell people that's weak. I can't come in here and tell people I don't know what I'm doing or that I'm not happy with what I've actually created and stuff. So, so that was hard for me too, because when do you admit or when do you ask for help or whatever? So I'm wondering with you, um, were you similar where no one was saying to you, Taryn, what's wrong?
absolutely. And I think this
Yeah.
is an epidemic in our healthcare system, to be honest with you,
Hmm.
is as a business owner or a doctor, dentist who's relies on people trusting them, having confidence in them. I mean, I needed to put up this front in order to have people work for me. No one would work for me if I expressed that I was a mess.
Yeah.
If I let on the truth, patients wouldn't come to see me. Establishing a sense of self-confidence and holding it all together was imperative to my success, I thought. And I think
Right.
that, many of us don't reach out for help for that exact reason. The shame is a big part of it. I think I compared myself a lot to the community I had left behind in South Africa in terms of my opportunity. Who was I to complain about the opportunities that I had available to me when so many people I knew and loved didn't have the same opportunity? So I think shame prevents us from telling the truth or asking for help. But also, in terms of business, we have this idea that I have to look like I'm holding it all together. Otherwise, my business will fall apart. It felt very
Mm.
tenuous if I dared ask for help. What if someone were to find out that I wasn't as excellent as I was trying to portray? And I think holding it together was a big part of my falling apart, because we eventually were holding up this house of cards, and any moment when one falls down, the whole house tumbles down, and that's really what it felt like. Um, Interestingly, when you said the the aspect of blame, I think we do that to feel a little bit better. Blame feels a little better than hopelessness. Complete defeat
Oh,
and
yeah.
victimization. Blame feels much better.
Feels a lot better. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's actually a great way to crawl up the ladder of emotional, um, the emotional vibrational ladder. So if you imagine at the very bottom of the emotional vibrational ladder is this sense of hopelessness and despair. And if we kind of crawl up to more empowering emotions, we get to blame and anger and frustration, and eventually we can climb all the way up to empowerment and love and gratitude. But we have to start small. So actually blame felt better for me, and blame was actually a win for me. And the trap about blame is you can find many people to join you in blame. And so I think a lot of us get stuck in blame because it does feel better. And then we find friends who will join us in blame, whether we're blaming the economy, we're blaming insurance.
Hey everyone, if you like what I'm doing with this podcast and want to participate in more of the things I'm thinking about and exploring, subscribe to my newsletter today. It's super simple. Just go to mikemalatesta.com right now, put in your email, and you will get the very next issue. It's short, thoughtful, and designed to inspire, activate, and maximize the greatness in you.
Insurance companies. We're blaming the people who work for us. We're blaming There's a million things that we can find to blame, and it's easy to find other people who will join you in the blame game and prevent you from doing exactly what you said, which is taking ownership of your own responsibility for your situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of company available when you want to get into the blame game. A lot of company. And then it's reinforced, of course, everywhere you look, on the particularly in politics, our leaders are blamers, right? So yeah, I mean, they're setting the stage every day to
Every day.
make it okay to blame somebody else for what's happening to you.
Yeah.
So you had this epiphany, which is great. A lot of people have the epiphany, but this miserable epiphany, but so many of us just go, well, I guess that's just the way it is.
Mm.
You didn't do that. Why not? And how did you not?
Well, what I actually did was I ran away from everything. I actually did. I actually got to such a low space that I thought, I'm not capable of this.
Mm.
And I sold my practice as quickly as I could, sold my house, went to a divorce attorney, went to a bankruptcy attorney, because as part of the dental world, we have very high student loan debt until we get ourselves up on our feet. I ran, left the state, fled the state, Mike.
You were on the lam
I
from
was on the
yourself.
lam. That was the only, that was the ultimate expression of fight or flight. I was done
Mm.
fighting, and I thought, now I'm just going to flee. And the fascinating thing is, the one person I couldn't run away from was myself. And that was where my rebuilding and reconnection with myself began. I started getting very quiet. What was actually really interesting is I I have 3 children. My first 2 were born in this era of anxiety and overwhelm, and I was back to work seeing patients before my due date. So that
Mm.
sounds crazy, but I said it right. My children were, because I was washing my body in cortisol and stress and anxiety, and I just couldn't hold on to pregnancy. So my 2 first babies were born very prematurely. And because I had to get back to work, I was back to work seeing my patients before my due date. And so when I fled, I swore when I was pregnant with my third, I wouldn't do the same, wouldn't repeat the same pattern, and actually started a course in hypnobirthing, which was self-hypnosis of how to go through labor without medications, being really present, using your mind-body connection to walk through labor. And that taught me an art that I really credit to turning my life around, which was meditation. And I think it wasn't so much that meditation has a secret silver bullet. It's just the skill of getting quiet and learning how to regulate your own nervous system. Because
Mm.
I was very capable. I would find out later as I rebuilt new businesses and went back into the orthodontic world and treated patients successfully and led a much bigger, more successful team. But what I hadn't learned yet was how to regulate my own nervous system so that I could be more present in the moment and access that intelligence that was there all along. What was actually happening is my fear and anxiety was hijacking my intelligence, hijacking my presence. And I was
Mm.
making decisions left and right out of a place of reactivity instead of response or proactive decision making.
And how long were you on the lam? Let's say, how long were you How long were you flighting? Um,
And not very long because I got bored very quickly. Which was also a great lesson. I learned I can't be a stay-at-home mom. For me, that doesn't light me up. So it
mhm.
lasted about 4 months, and then
Okay.
realized
Yeah,
that I needed to be in some entrepreneurial venture, creative venture, building a business again.
got it.
Yeah.
And the hypnobirthing allows you to have your third child without any medication, or you just
Yeah, it was really cool. That wasn't actually the biggest benefit. The biggest benefit is I was able to, that pregnancy, she was 2 weeks late. I mean, my body
oh,
was now an
yeah.
environment where she could survive, you know? And I had learned a technique of how to calm myself, um, which was so amazing because then I was able to build on that and give myself a chance to get quiet with myself and ask myself those deeper questions like, what does success look like to me? Because I realized what I had done was really live out someone else's algorithm of success and thought that that success would bring me happiness.
Mm.
But what really mattered was paying attention to my own happiness, and then success flowed. I mean, it was so interesting when I learned how to take care of myself and take responsibility for my own happiness. My relationships and my life got better. I was able to lead a team in a more impactful, empowered way. I was able to grow a practice to much greater success than I ever thought possible. And really, my focus was less on the success and more on taking care of myself.
Right.
Ironically, when we take care of ourselves, we can be better for other people.
So this may sound like a dumb question, but how did you know, or how did you come to know what made you happy?
Mm, lots of introspection. Lots of introspection and undoing what I thought I knew. So I think there was also a lot of trial and error. So, for example, when I was so miserable in that first business venture of mine, I thought, what will really make me happy is being a stay-at-home mom. That was the story I told myself. And then when I went there, it wasn't the truth. So asking myself what lights me up and not doing it from a veil of other people's judgment or expectations. So, what I think a good mother should be, or what I think a good orthodontist should be, or what I think a good business owner should be, but really what lights me up. And I realized things like work life balance, everybody's looking for work life balance. That actually didn't light me up.
Hmm.
Having a balance of being at home so many hours and work so many hours wasn't exciting for me. What lit me up was pouring my heart and passion into a pursuit and getting completely involved in it and diving into it head first. That lit me up. And when I gave myself permission to be different from everyone else and to establish those values and that success definition for myself, everything changed. When I stopped saying, well, a mother should look like this, or an orthodontist should look
Hmm.
like this. And I took that word should out of there and just listened to what thrilled me. I became a better leader. I mean, even as small as, um, at one point I wasn't a big fan of technology. Now I love it. But at one point that didn't light me up. So learning to delegate the things that don't light me up to people who are really good at it
Sure.
felt so much better. I mean, that seems so simple, but asking myself, is this fun? Is this enjoyable to me? And, now my definition of success is how many hours a day I spend feeling the way I want to feel. So the moment I'm in a space where I think, oh, this doesn't feel so good anymore, I ask myself, is this really what I want to be doing? And then I pivot, I change. I give myself permission to do differently. And sometimes that means changing the entire business model.
Yeah.
But every time I allow myself that permission to feel good, I find enormous success. It becomes easy. I step into flow. That magical place we're all hunting for is
Yeah.
really found when you're paying attention to what feels good.
It was interesting what you said there. It was almost like when you define balance as rigidity, meaning chunk, 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 that did not light you up. And now, if I hear you right, you're saying that when you are feeling in the flow or when you're doing something that lights you up, that provides you with that's balance for you. In other
Yeah,
words, when you're not doing that, then you're off balance.
that's interesting.
That
That's
be,
an interesting way to put it, Mike.
yeah, I don't know if it's right or not. Does that resonate at all, or is it just like, ooh, not even close?
I think I am so resistant to the word balance now because
Yeah,
I don't seek balance. I love thrill. I
I
like
love
to go
thrill.
on
Yeah,
adventures and, you know, hike mountains and do exciting things. I love doing that. Um, so for me, balance almost feels boring. I love passion and excitement in my life. Um, and when I find, oh, I'm really missing spending more time with my family, I allow myself that and I dive into
right.
that and I give myself permission to do that. I think you're right about the rigidity in terms of expectations. And I think that that's where we get hung up on this idea of work life balance. Just show me what that looks like or show me how to do that. But it's so individual. It's so personal to each one of us. It really is not something that we can compare with one another. And I think it's also changing throughout our life. I
Yeah,
think when I was 20, it looked very different from now at 45. And I'm sure it's going to change when I'm in my 60s. Right now, we live in this big home, beautiful home. I'm so grateful we could have all our family over here for Thanksgiving. That feels like success to me. But I
yeah,
know that one day this home will be too much for me and it won't feel like success. It'll feel like a burden. So giving ourselves permission to change that definition of success through our lives, and to allow our values to be fluid is huge. I think that when you mentioned earlier those 3 A's of appreciation and allowing, the allowing part is something I think we overlook, is allowing ourselves to grow and change and giving ourselves permission to be someone different today from who we were yesterday.
Why? So why do you think that is?
I think that rigidity steps in again because we have a very rigid sense of what success is. We create an idea for ourselves of what success should be, whether it's success in family or business or love or financial success. But
Yeah.
even financial
Right.
success can look different from year to year.
Yeah. Yeah. I sometimes think of it like when allow means like it's what I'm supposed to be. So that's why I don't allow, because I feel like I'm supposed to be certain things. And if what I'm supposed to be is outside of what I want to be, well, then the supposed to be wins because that's what I'm supposed to be.
Totally.
Or, yeah.
Yeah,
So
and I think
I'm interested in,
we expect other people to have the answer too. And I
yeah,
think really the answers are always within us. And I totally know what it feels like to not be able to access those answers. But the truth is nobody knows what is most important to you. Nobody
yeah,
knows what will work for you. Only you do. And that's where that skill of getting quiet and learning how to regulate your nervous system to quiet the noise in your own head, to access that intelligence that is there. I do believe every single one of us has that within us.
right, right.
It's just a matter of accessing it.
So, Taryn, if we knew you when you were on this road to miserableness, what would be the, and we knew you now, what would, how would the differences in you be externally observable or manifest themselves externally? So that would be like, oh, I used to know Taryn, but she's nothing like she used to be.
It's really interesting. I wonder how different it would be to other people. I mean, I'm still an orthodontist, still
Hmm.
married to the same incredible man, still have the same kids, living in a different house in a different state. My practice is much more successful, but probably you wouldn't know it. I probably look very similar. Maybe back then I was running more marathons. I don't know. I'm not sure
Okay.
from externally how different I would look, but I'll tell you, my entire reality changed. I
Yeah.
think I'm definitely able to be more present. And that's magic. You know, being present as a healthcare provider is such an important thing. I've learned that is when I can be present for my patients, I can be better for them. I mean, isn't that what we all want from our healthcare providers? Wouldn't it be a magical world where all your doctors knew how to take care of their own trauma response so that you didn't elicit one in your fear and anxiety as a patient? I mean, that's what I dream for my profession, is that we could learn as healthcare providers how to find that calm within ourselves so that we're not looking for validation from our patients who are going through their own thing, you
Right.
know, or validation from our team members, from our employees, or even from our children or my husband. I mean, the moment I realized that it's not my job to make my husband happy and it's not his job to make me happy, it gave me so much freedom. It allowed our relationship to be so much richer because we weren't responsible for each other's happiness. I'm responsible for my happiness. When I didn't
Right.
expect my assistant or my front desk or my office manager or my virtual assistant to bring me happiness, or my sister-in-law, when her actions didn't impact my lived experience, it was enormously freeing. And I
Yeah.
realized, oh, I get to get back into the driver's seat of my own life and find my own happiness for me and then show up for the people I serve.
I'm right with you there. You can't outsource your happiness, um, and sometimes it takes a lot of searching to find it.
Mm.
You to find what lights you up or what, but the search goes on. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
no one's going to like just come down into your life and put a spread of happiness in front of you like Thanksgiving dinner or something. It's just not going to happen.
And isn't that such a gift of this human experience? I mean, before we started the interview, we were both talking about things we're excited about in our lives
Yeah.
right now. And both of us mentioned something completely new, a
Yes.
brand new pursuit that we know nothing about, and how exciting that is. I mean, that lights me up now is the curiosity factor of new adventures and new learning opportunities. That growth for me has enormous value, and that's one of the things I learned about myself is I love to grow. Not
Mm.
everybody does, but giving myself permission to have that value is enormous because it allows me to wrap my arms around opportunities when they come along and that speak to that value. So, have there been relationships in my life that have not lasted because we haven't held the same values? Yes. It doesn't make those relationships less beautiful or important in the moment, but
Hey, everybody, just a quick pause here to let you know how much I appreciate that you've made time for my podcast. If you're not already a subscriber, please become one today. Leave a review and tell a friend. Now, let's get back to the show.
there's definitely relationships that are temporary because our values don't continue along the same trajectory. And
Mhm.
that's okay. Allowing for that to be true is also something that I've come to value in my life is just allowing for things to be and not feeling like everything has to have a meaning attached to it. We're great meaning makers. And often
Yeah.
the meaning that we attach to events in our lives can undermine our success or undermine our happiness. And realizing that not everything has to have a meaning attached to it has been very freeing.
Mm. Can I go back with you for a
Hmm.
minute? This coming to the U.S. from South Africa. You mentioned a couple of times, sort of com- comparing might not be the right word. I don't know. Comparing to what the advantages, I guess, that you had as a result compared to some of your people you knew or people who are still there. How did you come here, and what was it like there? I want to get a sense of what those differences are that you were talking about.
So when I came to America in the 80s, South Africa was just politically going through some very big changes. It was the end of apartheid. Apartheid hadn't quite ended when we left, but the writing was on the wall.
Hmm.
And I think my father, I thank my father because he made enormous sacrifice to bring us to America. He anticipated there'd be a lot of political turmoil as the country did what it needed to do, which was turn over and change the oppressive legislation that was in power at the time. So he brought our family over here and sacrificed enormously. It was really enormously. I'm so grateful to this day. So grateful to my dad for doing that. Um, and it was very difficult for many people to do that. There was a big brain drain out of the country. So they put a lot of limitations on how much money you could take out. And the opportunities were very difficult across the world. So the rest of our family stayed and
Hmm.
went through some very hard, challenging times. And I think, you know, it's interesting. In 1995, US News and World Report, I believe it was in 95, they were looking at where the happiest countries were in the world. And one of the countries that keeps coming up, and I think to this day is still one of the top few, is Denmark. And they interviewed the Danish and they said, "What is it about happiness? Why are you so happy? And why do you think Americans are so unhappy?" And one of the answers they got was, what feeds unhappiness in America is the American dream, chasing the American dream.
Mm.
That was their perspective. So in Denmark, they said, we don't expect to do better or get better. We're just happy with what we have. And it's really interesting when we look at cultural expectations of success and happiness. And it's really fascinating when you move from one country to another and you experience that societal understanding of success, societal
Yeah.
understanding of happiness. And when we came, it was before internet. So Africa was a very different place to Americans than it is today. When I came, I was 10 years old, and no one had an idea that white people, or at least in my school system, nobody knew that white people could live in Africa.
Yeah.
It didn't compute
Sure. Yeah.
to a lot of the kids. So the culture shock was one thing, but we came with this very real expectation that we better do well. We'd been gifted this opportunity. People had sacrificed to make it opportunity. We had better make it and make it really well in America because there was this opportunity for the American dream that my cousins in Africa didn't have. And when I speak to a lot of immigrants and children of immigrants, I get the same perception that you better do it. You better be successful. You don't have a choice. Many of us come and work our as hard as we possibly can, and even identify as being the hardest working person in the room. Maybe I'm not the smartest, maybe I'm not the fastest, but I will outwork
Right.
everybody here. And that temperament is a big part of our undoing, because when we face a challenge, we just do more. It's this kind of do more mentality. And doing more does get you a certain level of success. There's almost this little feedback that gets you to work even harder, because if you show up consistently, the compounding effect will bring you a certain level of success until you burn down.
Yeah.
And that's once again where we come back to that story of shame. And I think the shame aspect of it is, I'm here, I get gifted this opportunity. Why am I messing up so badly? Why can't I find happiness in this opportunity that other people don't have?
And at the same time, I'm assuming that your parents and your cousins and everyone else were like super proud of what you accomplished, right? What you were accomplishing, what the dream you were living, that American dream that you were chasing, you'd actually caught it, I would
Well,
think.
absolutely, in their eyes. And here's another interesting thing. Eleanor Roosevelt said, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. I'm sure you've heard that
Mm,
quote before many
yes.
times. And I love to just change the words a little bit. No one can make you feel anything without your consent. And that is
Mm,
true about inspiration or happiness. No one can make you feel successful without your consent. It might
yeah.
look like you have all the things in the world, but if you don't feel it, you're not successful. It doesn't matter what anyone says. So yes, in my cousin's eyes, I had made it. In my brother's eyes, I had made it. But that was, I felt anything but successful. I felt like a complete failure in all aspects of my life. And what's really cool about no one can make you feel anything without your consent is we have the power to feel anything despite what anybody else says. So there's the other side of that coin, is that we actually are the one that decides how we feel. So we get to choose again, which is a really interesting seat of power, is that just by choosing victimhood, we also get to choose empowerment.
Right. And I very much agree with you there. And I'm thinking about people now who think that choice is stressful. Like
Huh.
choosing for myself to be who I want to be is stressful because it may not fit into, like we were talking about before, into this supposed thing. Or
Mm.
I guess I'm really thinking about, all the things that come at you from, whether it's social media or whatever, that are sort of reinforcing this supposed, or this whatever. I think it's hard sometimes to just sit there and say, that's not who I am. This is who I am. And make that deliberate choice, or this is how I'm going to feel about this. Because I say that to my daughter all the time, because she gets bummed out if like somebody cuts her off. She's in the car. She's embarrassed. She's like embarrassed. Like, well, I don't know what I did, and she like wants to make it right with the person. And I said, the person's forgotten you. Just this is just be okay with these kind of things happen, and then you choose how you want to react to them. Just, it's over. It's done, and it's nothing.
Mm.
And just move on.
Yeah, I think what you're touching on here is that perception of judgment from
Yeah.
someone else,
Yes.
and that idea of, oh, who said it so beautifully? I'm worried about what you think I'm thinking. That crazy mind talk that we have when we're
Right.
so
Yeah.
concerned about what other people think. We think we know what they're thinking, and I think it's interesting because I'm going to relate this back to my story of coming from South Africa. When I came to America, I felt very different. I felt like a complete outcast. I felt like nobody understood me. And that story is not unfamiliar to most of your listeners. I think so many of us at one point in our life feel so different from everyone else. Nobody understands me. I'm so different. And we spend our lives trying to be the same and accepted by people. And actually, our superpower lies in being different. It's like
Hmm.
banging our heads against the wall. Why am I so different? Why am I so different? And then if you can just stop and appreciate and allow the uniqueness of you, you find the freedom. So then you get to own your definition of success, your own values, if they look very different from someone else's. I think trying to conform into somebody's description of success is what is so limiting. And when we can
Right.
finally just see ourselves as completely unique human beings, I mean, as you know, in business, that's a superpower. If you can set yourself aside, apart from everyone else, be completely unique, that's a winning business model. It's when we're trying to always conform to a certain standard that we limit ourselves. And when we're
Right.
constantly worried about what other people think, we deny ourselves that unique ingenuity that's within each of us.
It's hard though sometimes, right? To not care about what other people think.
It's courageous.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
courageous. Yeah.
it's courageous. And, courage, you can't be courageous without fear.
Mm.
So you have to be a little scared to take courageous action. Um, and I think we're worried about being perceived as egotistical or selfish. That's what I hear from a lot of people is, if I take care of myself, if I put my attention on my own happiness, if I create something that's just what lights me up, then that's me being very selfish.
Yeah.
And my argument is that we it's actually the greatest gift you can give from a perspective of a healthcare provider and a mom and a wife and a team leader, a leader of my team, of my employees. The greatest gift I can give to them is taking care of myself, because that gets that responsibility out of the way. I don't need you to make me feel good about myself anymore. Now I can see you as the whole person that you are, and I can be present for you without all the excess baggage. I'm taking care of myself. So I think, as educators, as teachers, there's nothing more important than learning how to take care of ourselves and our own happiness, and learning those tools and being willing and courageous enough to show up as the unique human being that we are, so that we can start breaking that paradigm for our children so that they don't feel like they have to conform. You know, we have so many, and I admire kids nowadays that are willing to see themselves differently, who are willing to challenge our paradigms, even of like gender identity. I mean, how crazy is that to our generation? But I admire that
Right.
questioning. I admire that curiosity of, why do we have to fit into a binary understanding of gender? I don't know. That's a great question. Who am I to judge? But when I allow myself to stand up as my own unique self, it gives other people permission to do the same.
That selfish thing that I mean, it's almost like you pitched me a softball there, because the subtitle of my book is How Getting Selfish Got Me Unstuck. And it's
That's right.
just a short break here to ask you a question. Have you read my book? It's called Ownership: How Getting Selfish Got Me Unstuck. And it's available on Amazon, Audible, and everywhere else. If you're looking for inspiration that will help you unlock your greatness and potential, order or download your very own copy today. I am a very big selfish advocate, but not in the way that we have been taught to define the word, but in a much more positive, like it's not ego, it's not narcissism. It's about knowing yourself, knowing what you want, and being the best you can be, because that's the only way that you can be the best for the people around you. The only way.
And it's a responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah.
Truly, it is. It is a responsibility, so much more than just the societal convention of selfishness. It's a responsibility. I mean, imagine if everybody took that responsibility of their own happiness and their own self.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have the problems that we have of taking advantage of one another, or putting someone down, or blame. We would each take up the ownership of our own responsibility of our own lives and take action on it. So I do see it as a responsibility.
So your career is very interesting to me, because you kind of took us through how you changed and how you just changed your outlook, changed everything about you, but you continue to be a practicing orthodontist. You've got a thriving practice, and yet you said, well, I'm going to use this, basically I'm going to use all the skills and experiences that I've had to get here, and I'm going to help a bunch of people. I think I read that your purpose is to help 1 million business leaders to or help empower or dream them to something. I don't know exactly what. So where did that come from, Tarryn? I think most people would be like, okay, I've got a life that I like now. I'm gonna just take more time off, or I'm just gonna do something other than dedicate my life to not only having this great career, but having another career top of it, or addition to it.
Well, I think that, what happened was during COVID. So COVID was so enlightening for so many of us. What I saw in my dental colleagues and medical colleagues were these incredible men and women who were literally putting smiles on children's faces on a daily basis, holding their teams together. When we furloughed our teams, small businesses did, especially in healthcare, we were forced to do so. We had to put our team members on unemployment, these people who we had been asking for decades to be brand ambassadors for our dreams, and literally put them on unemployment. And I watched my colleagues go into enormous fear and anxiety. We didn't know what was around the corner, what our businesses would look like on the other end, but they were holding it together and paying for their team members' healthcare insurance, despite them being on unemployment, without knowing what was coming around the corner, or investing in their businesses so that they could welcome their patients back. I mean, incredible efforts and dedication and passion. and so much misery and unhappiness in these incredible men and women. And I thought there has got to be a different way. And I noticed that in myself when I showed up with that responsibility of my own happiness, I could be better. And the shame, I could drop the shame because I could show up as the great provider I knew I could be. Where I was noticing a lot of my colleagues who were living in fear, they were still hiding behind a wall of shame because they
Mm.
were living in so much anxiety and unhappiness. And I thought there's got to be a different way. And, once I started working, I started studying neurolinguistic programming and cognitive behavioral therapy. And um, uh, I got a coaching certification, Robbins Madonna's. I studied anything and everything I could get my hands on of just how do we access this happiness for ourselves, and started coaching some of my dental colleagues. And it was amazing to me that when we have those tools for self ownership, we can do better for our patients. And I sound like a broken record, but it means so much to me. When you feel good, you can do good. And so this passion became something of mine in a bigger way because I was starting to see people transforming and really loving their lives.
Mm.
You know, in 2016, my brother took his life. And in the wake of that, I realized that he didn't have the tools to be able to live in a world of owning himself and appreciating this beautiful, precious moment that we have in our lives. And I'm so grateful every day for the learning that I have from my brother's passing. And I'm so grateful to him for the lessons that I've come away with. But I wish for all of my colleagues and for so many people that they could have those tools to not only enjoy and love and feel the happiness of this life, but I know that when we do so, we can change others' lives around us. So it's
Mm.
one thing being an orthodontist and transforming people's lives with their smiles, and I know the impact of that. But it's another thing to be able to support other healthcare providers, that ripple effect, having ripple effects and making a real change in the world in terms of how we take care of ourselves so that we can take care of one another. To me, there's no more important work than creating a new understanding of success and happiness.
And do you find do you find that these colleagues that you work with, do you find that they often feel like you felt before you ran away?
Absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. I think the medical system, the way that we don't learn how to take care of ourselves. We learn how to take care of other people, but we don't learn that fundamental that skill set of how to take care of ourselves. I mean, having gone through medical and dental school myself, nobody taught me. And
Mhm.
now I can see how important and valuable that lesson really is.
So why don't you tell us about your podcast and this course that you're putting together? You talked to me
Ah,
about at the beginning before we wrap this up, because you do have a wonderful podcast and I do want people to know about it.
thank you so much, Mike. Yeah, it's the business of happiness. And like I said, it was birthed during COVID. And I just started interviewing incredible people like you, Mike,
No,
to
thank you.
find out, what is the secret to being successful and happy? That was really the question I started asking. And it's been such an amazing journey. I'm so grateful for the podcast because I've just met so many wonderful people and so many new perspectives. Um, and then the course was birthed from putting together all those learnings that I had from experts and from all my studying. And it's really a course for healthcare providers, dentists and doctors, of how to find happiness. It's called Radical Happiness for Practitioners. And it's the how of how to access your responsibility for your own happiness, not just in your life, but also in your practice. So I believe deeply as an entrepreneur that our entrepreneurial journey is in itself a tool for personal development. We learn so much about ourselves in the entrepreneurial journey. And especially in medicine and dentistry, we have this great opportunity to do so. So our practice can actually serve our happiness instead of it feeling like it's constantly drawing from us. There's a way to go to work, get fueled by your work during the day so that when you come home, you're fully present for your family instead of feeling like you're drained constantly. And it's that magic that I encapsulated in this 12-week course. I'm so proud of it. And it really is transformative. But it gives the how of how to find happiness as a healthcare practitioner.
And how to practice, if someone's listening and they want to learn about that, where do they go?
Oh, thank you so much for asking. Well, if you want to, you can text the word happy to the number 207-600-2699. That's 207-600-2699. Just text the word happy. And what you'll find is actually a happiness quiz to find out how happy are you really. and that will lead you to the wait list for the next cohort of my course. But I think, if you're wondering, well, am I really happy? This quiz is a great way to find out. And also the questions themselves make you just wonder, ask yourself, where are my values right now and what matters to me right now? So even just taking the quiz is a great opportunity for personal insight.
And anyone can take the quiz.
Anyone can take the quiz. You're welcome to it.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for leaving us with that. I will take the quiz.
Oh, I'm excited, Mike.
just to see.
Fabulous.
So, Tarryn, Dr. MacCarthy, thank you so much for joining me today. Is there anything that I haven't asked that you would like to leave with our audience or share, or are we good?
I would love to ask you a question, Mike.
Okay, go.
What is your definition of success now at this point in your life?
Well, I think it's options, not obligations. Like I try to, so there's a selfish component to that, but it's really, so being an entrepreneur is about freedom, but in its rawest form, that's what it's about. You become an entrepreneur to be free. Trouble is, so many of us don't feel free at all, whether we're entrepreneurs or not. And we're in this supposed thing, this should thing, and all of that, and it's hard to break free from that sort of gravitational force. But you've said it all along in this, and I think it plays right into that options, not obligations. You have to know what lights you up, and then you have to put constraints in your life around, to the extent that you can, and to as often as you can, around what lights you up. In place. Options, obligations in your life, and you will be happier, and you will be more productive, and you will have more of an impact than you otherwise would.
Absolutely. Beautiful. Thank you.
How'd I do?
All right. I loved it. I love hearing your perspective, because I think it, the way you say it speaks to some people, and the words you use, and then the way someone else says it speaks to someone else. But I think it's a beautiful way of phrasing it. The options speaks to freedom, whereas obligations do feel constricting and limited. So I love that perspective. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. So for everyone listening, takeaways for today: be selfish. Make your future your property. Okay, get clear about what you want your future to look like, and then make it your property, the future that you actually want to own. And until next time, thanks for joining me on the show.